Okay, good morning, art students. I'm going to talk about the skateboard project today and the different steps you should be taking when approaching your project. Like we've talked about in class, make sure you cut off the ends of your board, find the midpoint, and then go ahead and create a curve down to the side. If you don't have scissors, you can shade the background. You could do this with a marker. And yeah, don't overthink it. Don't worry about it being perfect, the edges of your board. And then if you can find scissors, you can just carefully cut the edges. And yeah, it's just a matter of cutting those top and bottom corners to create a curved edge. If you lost your project paper, any sort of cardboard would work fine. Next, you want to organize the placement of your different metaphors and objects with pencil. I did this with circle, and I know I want movement going back and forth, so I added some lines. Now, you slowly add details and start to map in what you're doing. I decided for this skateboard, I just picked a bunch of metaphors that I saw on the mood board. So I don't really have a unifying theme in mind yet, but I saw people are interested in drawing skulls and soccer balls. And I also wanted to incorporate text. I saw a lot of flowers and moons and suns. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try to combine a bunch of metaphors I'm seeing that are popular, like this soccer ball right here. And I'm going to try to show you guys how to create unity at the end, just to inspire you to get going. I'm starting to think about movement as I do this, meaning I'm drawing lines kind of going up and down. And now I'm thinking about flowers. Okay, so if I repeat something like a rose, throughout the board, that might create unity. And what I can do is I can create a mood board to show you guys all my different reference images. But I'm looking at a picture of a rose right now, basically. And if you think back to the beginning of the year, I am using ellipses to kind of make the flower feel sort of round. Notice I'm going really light with my line weight at first, and then I'm working in detail with a darker pencil right here. So, you got to go really light at first and then pull back any pencil markings you kind of don't need. And simplifying. So I'm adding in the flower right there. So right here, I am really, because drawing a rose felt a little harder and I don't really know how to do it, I'm looking at a picture. Now I'm defining edges. And I'm thinking about different ways to create repetition throughout the board. I have these different metaphors. So if I repeat the rose, that might help to create unity. Now I might come into an issue later on because I didn't have a draft and a plan with unity, but we'll kind of see how I do. So again, I'm taking the time to repeat this flower right here. And I remember getting a little impatient at this point because I was like, oh, this is taking a long time. But, remember at this point, you're just kind of mapping things out, and you will be putting in more details with the markers. But your pencil work is kind of your plan. And your pencil work keeps you from being afraid when you're approaching the board with markers. Now I, started to repeat circles because the prospect of drawing rows again and again started to overwhelm me. So I thought maybe if I repeat circles, that will help. Right. This is the other end of the board. I have a soccer ball on one end, and this idea of sun and moon and time was really popular. So I basically found a reference image of a sun and a moon together. And I want on this end of the board, I think, to bring a lot of joy. I got the skull of sadness in the middle, but on this end of the board, I want it to be kind of a very, very happy thing, showing students that, things are really difficult in the pandemic now. It's easy to feel hopeless, but, time is moving, and we're going to get through it together. So I'm kind of sketching in with a light value H pencil, like a 2H. I'm sketching in the face of the moon right here. You know, the sun and the moon showing the times going by. And I'm really just looking at my computer and my mood board, kind of looking at my reference images. Right now, I'm kind of drawing the ends of the sun, and I ran out of space actually, but you know, I'm just going to make it work. So I'm making slight changes, and I'm realizing that the sun rays can kind of help to create movement. So I'm putting in a lot of hatching and cross hatching, and I'm starting to think about the direction that my markers are going to go when I'm drawing. And the marker direction and the hatching creates visual movement, just like, you know, Vincent van Gogh's paintings would. You know, the strokes that I take around the board help direct the eye. Now I'm taking some time to add in more details to the skull. I'm incorporating text now. So I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to have like words and some kind of message so we could kind of take what we learned from graffiti art. I also, when I'm looking at the other end of the board, I'm realizing that I need a lot more stuff going on this end of the board to create balance, right? I have a lot happening with the sun and the moon. So I decided to put a crown on top of the soccer ball because some people were talking about missing school during office hours. And then I'm just kind of working a message in right here on top of the skull. And I'm thinking if the message starts here and then moves to the right, that'll help to create visual weight. Because I think the sun and the eye will create a lot of visual weight and tension. So I wrote fight for you. And now I'm writing believe. So I'm kind of like sketching that in. I did a curvy line and I'm now carving out the text letters. And that takes time, you know, and patience. And, you know, this board was done in several work sessions. So far, I've probably spent about an hour and 50 minutes on it. And you just really have to be patient with yourself and do it one step at a time. So I'm writing believe in tomorrow here. So I'm carving in the words tomorrow right here. And I did a curvy line, and I'm taking the time to do that. So I'm writing believe in tomorrow. And I recommend this, you know, it's not required anywhere on the rubric to put in text, but it does create kind of like detail, and it might help you to clarify what it is that you want to say and make a strong decision through your art. That's why we do a lot of text incorporation in Art 1, because we're trying to establish that voice. Now I'm darkening edges, and I'm thinking about that skull, and I'm putting in more detail. Okay, now I'm thinking soccer ball. I'm actually looking right now at a picture of a soccer ball because I really don't know what a soccer ball looks like. And I'm working in the hexagon, like little shapes. I think that's a hexagon, 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's a pentagon. But anyways, I'm kind of actually just looking at, thinking I got to add a lot of details if I want this side of the board to be heavy, because the side with the moon and the sun are going to attract a lot of visual attention. So you want, you know, stuff happening on the top, the bottom, and the middle of the board. That's why this is such an interesting design problem. I'm putting in dark value. Remember, dark value creates weight and spatial depth. So the ball kind of is coming out. I'm attracting a lot of attention because I really am shading dark with my pencil, and I'm putting dark value behind. Now I'm thinking, wow, snap. I'm just looking at the soccer ball. So I'm going through, I'm adding more value, and I'm kind of trying to repeat, you know, these circles. I might have a problem with color balance later, but that's, you know, where I am as far as pencil work. And, you know, you have to give yourself a break. So this was after some time. But next, this is so exciting. I started to create an underpainting. And I got this concept of creating an underpainting just by watching YouTube videos. You start with, right now I'm starting with one of the lightest warm grays. You'll see WG, it should say WG, in your marker kit. Or you could do this with like light pencils. But basically, I'm kind of working in values right now. And I'm following a YouTube video, right? And anything that you want to draw, you can follow a YouTube video. Let Mr. Rivera and I know, and we'll find different reference videos. But the more times I'm using the same marker right here, and the more times that I put strokes on top of each other, the darker the value gets. So now I'm taking a different gray. I think actually that was a cool gray. Now I'm adding the warm gray. But you basically want to start light and then go dark. And I'm using the fat tip. Now I'm using the skinny tip. But at first use that broad tip, and you're just kind of helping the eye to understand where the shadows are. And you could do this on anything. You don't have to be drawing a skull, right? So drawing a sphere, drawing flowers, drawing a soccer ball. You could go ahead. You see here I'm using the gray on the edge of my soccer ball right there to try to create, a light source. And now I'm trying to do it on the sun right here. This is the warm gray. I maybe should have used the cool gray. One of my issues is I just grab markers and I don't think too much about my colors. So make sure you give yourself that time. But I was thinking, okay, so if my light source is coming from the right, where would the shadows be? So I'm starting to work that in, and I'm just experimenting, and I'm doing it with the spheres too, trying to establish a consistent light source. And and now I'm doing it with the roses. So I'm moving all over the board doing this underpainting, trying to take the concept from the skull that I learned and then going all over, doing it to the edges of the crown, all these circles that these spheres I'm purposely repeating to create unity. And if you're stuck with what to repeat spheres, repeat triangles, repeat different shapes. But now I'm working in a darker value because I'm thinking, who's going to even look at the spheres? And now I'm going back in with the thinner end of one of the even darker grays, right? So it's really important that you organize your colors by value. And I'm working in darker details. So now I have a dark gray. And you really got to work dark to light. And then you slowly pick out what you think is even more important. Now, do you have to go this far into detail? No. But you have the tools of the markers, right? And if you go from light to dark, you're going to feel more confident with what you're doing. And you're going to feel, less afraid. One thing I want to point out too is notice how much I am rotating the board, right? So, and I'm actually standing for most of the time when I'm drawing. So, often we get kind of stuck, when we're working because we're sitting and we're not moving very much. Make sure that you are moving a lot. Okay, right now I am continuing to add in more detail, and I'm thinking about that movement, right? So by working in the warm grays, I'm thinking that'll help to move the eye sort of around the board. So you can kind of see this repetition of these curvy shapes. So always take the time to zoom out and think about what you're doing. So that was like 45. This is where I think I made a bit of a mistake. And I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I started to work in green on top of the sun. And I think it's okay. I thought it was like a darker yellow, but it really was a green. And, once I pulled away, I was like, oh, damn, that is green. But I thought, you know what, that's fine. I kind of like this kind of bright green color anyway. So I'm going to put it throughout the board. So I'm thinking this green on the left will serve as like a shadow for the sun, and the sun will be mainly yellow. So I'm doing like this green and yellow color scheme throughout my board. Now, let's just emphasize, guys, that it is totally okay for you to make modifications to your board as you go. It does not need to look exactly like your color draft. Art is supposed to, as you're planning it, is supposed to change slightly. And just like life, you kind of adapt to choices. You adapt to things that happen. So it's like, wow, all of a sudden I had green. Instead of freaking out and not finishing, I'm going to kind of work it in. You got to work it in. If you spill something on your design, you got to work it in. So right now I'm just kind of starting to work in color into the text. I am still using the broad tip marker, and I'm kind of still seeing what I'm doing as an underpainting. I know the flower is going to be red or is like some warm color. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to put this warm green, bright green, that's kind of a complement behind the flower on purpose. And now I'm starting to get a little anxious and I'm working in those dark values. You got to do that slowly. I took a break here, stopped, took a picture. But, it takes time. Here I am. I collected all of my reds because I know I'm going to work on the flowers now. And I'm actually watching a YouTube video right now. So I'm kind of watching and I'm starting with pink. Pink is actually red with a lot of white, or a lot of white with red, I should say. And I'm thinking that'll be my light value. One thing I regret with this is I wish I had left more white on the flower for a highlight. Okay, so I'm slowly working in dark values, darker reds. So I purposely kept all of the different markers in the shot so you guys could see that I'm going back and forth between the different reds. When you're drawing something, collect all the colors that are the same color and kind of place them next to each other. So I'm kind of now painting in darker values down at the bottom of the flower. If my light source is coming in from the right of the board, I don't know if I would have a shadow there, but I was thinking that light would be blocked by like leaves or whatever's behind. This right here, maybe I should have made that a green leaf. I was in a hurry. Okay, now I'm using the thin edge, the thin pen. And the thin pen is really, really great for kind of like doing little dots, adding all sorts of little details. The squiggly lines are kind of fun, and that kind of brings the texture that it's a rose, right? But I'm adding different colors throughout the rose to kind of create balance, like actually in the rose. So I have an even amount of dark and light. I'm trying to work in some of the grays and purples. I'm just trying stuff, and I'm not going to worry about messing up. And that's something that's really hard to teach in Art 1 is it's just kind of like, worst thing you can do is to not do anything at all, right? So don't be afraid of creating something that you don't like or you think looks funny. Okay, working in more details with the rose now, trying to repeat that. So like when you're thinking about, well, what visual elements am I going to repeat to create unity? How am I going to create groups? You may want to consider, well, okay, well, how long is this going to take me to draw? And it should take you a while, but you don't want to pick things that are so hard to draw that you never finish, right? So I'm kind of like wrapping up the rose. I don't know if I'll have patience enough to draw another one of those. And you have to give yourself time. You have to give yourself patience. Now I'm layering in a darker green. And I really recommend putting different colors on top of each other. That's what you're supposed to do with this. That's kind of like a mixing. I'm also thinking about repeating the curved shape of the moon that you see under the sun. I'm actually repeating that shape by putting in that dark value. So I'm kind of repeating this kind of curves, these curved C's with the leaf and stuff. And I'm thinking if I repeat these curvy lines in my choices as I draw things, that will help to bring everything together. So again, totally different kind of metaphors and visual elements. These are the things that you guys put on your mood board, a lot of you. And I'm showing, the lines you put around them and the shape that you draw things in, repeating these curved C's might help me to create unity in the end and make everything kind of work together. Now, here's the trouble with putting in text. It takes a long time. That's why the graffiti art was kind of like its own separate project. But I'm slowly kind of now outlining the text, and giving myself time to do that. I would recommend looking up spelling, because sometimes when I draw, I make big spelling errors because I'm thinking so much about how something looks. And here I made a big error. I actually thought that was a G, and I wasn't even thinking about what I was writing because I was thinking about color. And I'm stopping, and I realize it's a B. It's supposed to say believe. So should I stop my project and throw it out? No, I'll figure out a way to fix it later. Maybe I'll find whiteout or something in the house. And I'm continuing to, work in those details right here. In the N, and, giving myself time. I'm also breathing deeply. And I really hope I can finish this for you guys. But by now we're presumably watching this in class, you should have like the pencil work of your skateboard done. And you should be working in the color. If you don't yet, start putting in that pencil work, start putting in that detail. And my advice is to just really make decisions and move on. You could always do another version of something if you're not satisfied with it. So guys, what I'm doing now is I'm starting to work in those middle values. I'm finding blues, darker grays, and I'm starting to create shadows. So the beauty with starting with lighter values is then you can slowly work in the details. So really make sure you go light to dark. And I am looking back at that same YouTube video, and I'm putting in little dots. And sometimes, you're going to be off with your color choices and your value choices, and that's okay. This is about learning, right? This project's about learning about, different values, different colors, and how they attract attention. But basically, you need to know as soon as you start adding in colors that have more black, like this dark gray, colors that are darker, it's going to attract attention, right? And it's going to attract the eye. So what I'm doing right now is I am slowly, with the thin edge, adding in detail. Then I'm going back in and I'm grabbing my warmer colors and I'm adding in more details. So notice how I'm moving back and forth between light and dark grays. And that is just something that you need to do and you need to be comfortable with doing. And keep up the good work. So your workspace should have all of your colors laid out, right? You should have all your colors laid out. You stop and organize your colors from time to time so you can make informed decisions. Do you have to draw a skull? No, right? It's just some of you have that on the mood board. So you're drawing kind of with this project, whatever thing you want, always looking back and forth between your reference images, your mood board, and your object. Now, it is very possible that you are looking at your mood board and you're kind of like, wait a second. I don't believe that I have the correct reference images. So right now, I was actually looking up more stuff, right? So sometimes you may have to stop and you may have to find more imagery because you don't really know what to draw or you don't know how to draw it, right? So maybe you have to stop and research from now on again. So often when kids are like, I don't know what to draw, or I don't know how to draw it, they skip the research process. They didn't take the time to find images, right? So, make sure you reach out and be like, hey, I'm having trouble with, drawing this, or I'm having trouble with finding an image that looks like, X, Y, and Z, and let us know, and we will look for it. One thing that I'm just learning now is purples and blues, these light purples and blues, they actually make really cool shadows. So I'm putting in the shadows of the teeth, and then I'm putting in those dark details of the teeth. So continuing to put in those details, dancing around, a lot of stippling happening here. I know it doesn't look like stippling, but I'm like lifting up my pen and I'm putting it down, lifting up my pen and putting it down as far as shadows. Okay, I tried to make a bold decision. Now I'm trying to create contrast. So I'm actually thinking, okay, well, what color do I have going on in the skull? And I'm going to layer in the opposite. Then I realized since the skull is mostly white, I'm just going to layer in a darker value on the top side. So I'm creating contrast. And that's what you got to start to do as you're thinking about the background is you got to put in opposite colors. You got to put in opposite values and layer in from there. When you put opposite values, lights and darks next to each other, or opposite colors, that's when the board starts to look cool. Because the eye is interested in, we like seeing different things put next to each other. I'm putting in a shadow right here. So you have to always think, how am I going to make my design pop from far away? So yellow is a really light value. And I'm putting in, so that's why I'm putting in a dark value behind. Don't have to have shadows. But again, the similar idea of putting darks and lights next to each other. And that's something you guys got to think about as you're working stuff in. I also am about to get out the black now. Mr. Rivera's talked about this in class. I think it's been really great. You want to reserve black for when you really need it. And right here, I'm working it in to kind of help the viewer to understand that this is the opening space of the mouth, and that's the end of the form. So I stopped using black right away because it was really popping, and I use it with reservation. Now I'm layering in some blue, and I'm actually looking back at the YouTube video to create shadow. So I'm thinking I'm going to put this blue in throughout the board to kind of move the eye around. So you want to put notes of colors throughout the entire board as you're working stuff in. So please keep that in mind. Yeah, and just make sure you're getting to it. Make sure you're having fun. Now I'm bringing black into the soccer ball. So I'm back with the black. I'm doing the edges to help understand, okay, well, that's the end of the skull. Now I'm okay, black is the heaviest color. I'm going to add black in the soccer ball, right? And that is going to pull the eye from the skull to the soccer ball. I hope this helped, guys.
In this portion of the video, I'm going to talk about details. And right now, I am just sorting out and I'm finding certain colors. And I want to remind you guys that before any sort of work session, you want to organize your colors. I'm picking out all the warm colors because I want to balance the red, because the red is so intense in the roses. And I know I want the eye to go throughout the board. So what I'm doing is I am adding red throughout the board. And I am also adding red behind the soccer ball on purpose because I want the eye to see the red in the roses, and then I need the soccer ball to pop out more. And the soccer ball is white. So everyone, just think about that. What colors should you add behind different objects in your board to make certain things pop out? That's called color contrast. And you can ask us, in the chat, hey, what color do you think I should put next to white? Or what color do you think I should put next to my board here, and put that on Seesaw? I'm also using orange. Trying to think of why I thought about using orange right here, or pink. Oh, because so there's a lot of pink in the roses, and pink is pretty much the opposite of this neon green. That's a good complement. So I thought if I went ahead and I outlined all of the letters in kind of like a pink movement, you got like this pink line going. The lines and the way that you outline the colors will move the eye around the board, most definitely. Now I'm using a different value pink. So I have the super intense pink on the outside, but while it is still wet, I am actually blending in the light pink with the intense pink. And I'm moving around the board, and it's kind of tedious because I'm going in and out of the letters. And, Melanie Cruz was talking yesterday in class about how long the skateboard's taking her. It could be time consuming if you have a lot of details, but it's your final, so have fun. But don't think like I have to have a lot of details in order to get a good grade on the skateboard. Okay, now while I still have that same pink in my hand, I am moving around the board and I'm adding that light pink to all of the circles. So I'm basically taking the color of the roses and I'm splashing it throughout the board. Later on, I realized after the video that I need one more ball of pink to the left. You see that I only put 2 in, but I really need one more. I put it underneath there, but I need one in the bottom left. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but I realized that like from far away. So really remember to pause once in a while. Now I'm adding a bunch of pink lines throughout the board. Why? Because I'm trying to keep the eye moving around the board. And I know that the eye is attracted to this like hot pink color. So I'm outlining things with the pink, and I'm thinking like little splashes of the pink throughout. We'll try to create unity. Okay, I know that I need to add more detail to the sun. So I'm starting to do that with a dark gray marker. And I'm basically bringing out the values now. Now remember last class I did an underpainting, and I put in the light grays to kind of know what I'm doing. But now I'm going in and I'm cleaning up those hard boundaries and I'm really adding in kind of harder sort of colors. So the eye will pop out. And then I just kept doing it. I started to add in more hatching at the side, and then I found this beautiful yellow color. This is the yellow that I was looking for on the first day. So, make sure you're using the colors you want. And I actually thought it looked really nice against the neon green. So I wasn't upset anymore about the neon green, and I started stroking the yellow throughout the board. I started adding a lot of it in the background. And then I started really applying it, because this yellow is bright too. I started really applying it to the crown that's in the background. So to keep kind of with my AJR theme and my artistic voice, I have a crown in the background right there on top of the soccer ball, and it also gives me the same kind of wavy movements that the rose does, these same like pointy triangle shapes. Then I am grabbing, I'm playing around with having different purples sort of in the background, because purple's the opposite of yellow. But I decided right there to add another one of those pink balls. And again, I should have more of those pink balls on the opposite side. Adding more shadows in there behind the skull on top of the yellow. So the yellow's not overpowering too much. Adding in more kind of like purple circles to fill in the space. And I'm really just trying to balance with those bright red roses sort of happening. Now I'm painting in more of the purple, because light purple makes a great shadow. So I put some of that in the moon. And and then I'm continuing with the lines and the shapes, moving the eye around the board. The bright green is becoming a theme. Now the bright green is not overpowering so much because I have the yellow. So I'm moving that throughout the board and keeping the theme of green throughout the board. And now I'm adding little dashes, kind of like Van Gogh. So like little swirls of movement. Notice how sometimes the swirls go up, right? Because I'm thinking about the path I want the eye to take. I want the eye to go around the skull. And then I want it to go around the soccer ball. So going ahead, I'm darkening, adding in little hatches here and there, darkening the edges. Fabulous. So exciting. Okay, then I'm darkening the corners right there. Darkening the corners, darkening the corners. Okay, so this is a dark blue. It's fabulous. It's like a blue purple. And I really liked it. I found it and I was like, okay, I'm going to put that behind all of the yellow. And then I started to put it layered in a little in the skull to make the skull pop out. And then I found this awesome, like kind of like brown yellow. I'm using the brown yellow as a shadow behind the different points of the crown. So I'm putting it to the left. So I'm still thinking my light source is coming from the top. And now I'm adding those little dashes and little stipples with the dark blue on top of the green. So remember the green was a light value, but this blue is a dark value. And I'm doing details, so I'm doing dark values second. Now I'm putting in line work, really showing the edge of the crown, going in a lot of dashes. And I'm really using the edge of the tip right here. So even though I'm not using the thin edge, I can really get quite an edge with my marker by just doing thin dashes. Now I'm going in with a light gray, and a lot of stipples, right? And I'm doing the thin edge, doing little squigglies. So I'm thinking that the edge of the crown is going to be puffy. So I'm basically adding in dots of that beautiful, beautiful dark blue-green to give it texture. So in your final stages of the skateboard, you can think about, where do I want to add dots? Where do I want to add hatching? Where do I want to add cross hatching? And the shading technique you choose, you can actually do that with marker, right? And how you draw, how you change direction, the direction of the marker, the dots you make, the strokes, that actually helps the viewer's eye kind of understand what's happening in your design, and it directs the eye to move around the board. So I'm giving these little swirls. Notice how I'm changing the direction of my marker. If you add like very expressive lines like this that move around the board with your marker, I decided I'm going to give you extra credit, like big time extra credit, because I think that's really, really advanced and that takes a lot of courage. So if I see swirls moving around like this, like different line direction, you will get extra credit. So like look alive, see how you can add lines going in different direction to move around the board. And a lot of kids don't do that, but look at the background of your skateboard and be like, okay, how am I going to do that? Okay, I'm adding in the texture of the hair. I think this is hot pink. And on top of the yellow, and I'm using orange, I'm adding in more shadow because orange is kind of like a darker value for yellow, sort of. And I'm adding in more shadow on the crown and the side of the sun to make it seem more dark. Adding in more detail. Okay, I got a dark marker now. I don't think it's black, or it might be. It's like a dark gray. So I got the dark gray, and I'm shading in those hexagons that I've been meaning to shade in. And I think I don't shade in the one to the right because I'm subconsciously, I was thinking the light's coming in, so that's going to be a lighter gray. But I'm basically going around, and wherever there is like something ends or something begins, I emphasize that with the black. Okay, going in with orange and adding in more shadows because splashes of orange throughout the board will help to move the eye around. And then I'm also paying attention to the pink. So during this whole process, I'm constantly kind of like stepping back and I'm looking where the colors are and I'm making sure the colors are throughout the board. Okay, now I'm adding in more pink. I'm actually adding pink on top of the black right there. So layering, if you are putting colors on top of each other, extra credit, right? Because by putting colors on top of each other, you're actually making different colors. You're layering things on top of each other. So put colors on top of each other purposely. Oh, look at that contrast right there. I added that green behind the sun, and then all of a sudden the sun's popping out more. So I have a darker value green, and I'm kind of layering in now my final values, really showing the edge, really layering in the edge of the sun. All right, and and I'm stepping back, and if you have white taking the time to look at my board and think about color pencil, what else do I or want to add anything right white now? in your house, find What it else? because it is money.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm using white. This is actually called gouache, but it's basically white out. And I'm taking the brush that I have and I'm putting in highlights in the eyes at the edge of the spheres. And let me just tell you, using a little bit of white somewhere on your board at the edge of the beige is huge. So I am using the white to kind of move the eye around the board, add in lines moving around the board everywhere, and all of a sudden, to me, like the board just started to come to life. I'm also fixing the B in Believe. It's a way to fix things, and you know what? It's so fun. I'm just going to tell you guys, and I was thinking about it, I'm like, I'm going to order them all white out, or I'm going to try to. But, make sure, and now I'm adding in the white with the soccer ball because the white's coming in. So it's just the white is so powerful. So we're going to keep going with the project. Adding in splashes everywhere. Putting in white at the edge of the soccer ball right there. And then adding stipples of white. So I was thinking while I was doing this, and I'm like putting in white on all the letters, and I'm having so much fun. Like, am I overdoing this? And that's a good question for you to stop and ask once in a while. But to me, it just looked good. And that's why I love working with beige paper, because then the kids, then you guys like have the opportunity to think about white as such a powerful thing and such a necessary thing to go back and add white. Because white is just as important as black. Really, it's the white and the black that you add at the end that kind of really brings stuff to light. And adding white kind of brings texture. I actually spilled some white on the board at the bottom where that rose was. That was a puddle of white. But I was working it in. I didn't freak out. Okay, so put in dots everywhere. Now I'm just adding stipples and dots throughout the board to kind of move the eye in all sorts of different directions. And it gives it texture and it gives it unity. So I really recommend doing little dots like this, doing little stipples, even if you don't have white, doing it with like a color. And now by adding these little dots, it almost looks like it's snowing, which makes me think of, Christmas or the sun hitting the sand on the beach. But I'm basically going in, and now I'm adding a star because I thought, how am I going to create a focal point? How am I going to make sure the eye kind of looks somewhere? So I'm going to be interested in class to see if you guys see a focal point on my skateboard. But by adding this star, that's creating converging lines going out and going towards the middle. But I sort of decided that I wanted that to be my focal point, maybe a little late in the game. And if you don't have a focal point, don't stress, It's just kind of like these are different principles, we use them. Then I decided I wanted to add a star on the left and on the right, maybe a little smaller. Maybe that's going to hurt my focal point. And while I was doing this, I was like, oh, I added a star in the moon's eye too. It's just kind of like, am I redoing it? But you just keep going, and you always stop and you pull back. Am I overdoing it? That's what I meant. And yeah, adding more dots, and I'm trying to make something fun and something that's visually pleasing. Again, whiteout's not required, but if you have like the white pencil, everyone try today layering the white pencil on top of some of your color. Or just, be mindful of leaving areas of your board empty. But yeah, get that white color pencil. When you're thinking about final details in your skateboard, obviously your priority is to make sure the colors are balanced. Left to right, you got warm, cool colors. Another fun thing to do is go in with a pen. Any black pen really works. I've seen a ton of people draw cool stuff with ballpoint pens. But go in with a black pen. Hey, blue pen would work too because blue is a dark value. And start to add in texture. So right now, I'm really just scribbling with my pen. And I'm not worried about making a mistake. I let all of the white out dry. And I'm just kind of doing squiggly lines to really define the edges and to create a unifying texture throughout the board. If you add a lot of shading, I'm essentially shading with my pen. If you add a lot of shading to a form, the eye will see it as coming forward in space. So I'm basically adding hatching with the pen, cross hatching, adding hatching inside of the eye, right? Adding in the eyelashes, and that's what really brings something to life. Now notice that I'm doing that at the end, right? So this is what's so fun. You know, you put in all this work into a project, you go in and you put in those final details. Again, if I see any sort of like evidence of hatching, cross-hatching, drawing techniques, shading, I will give you extra credit because you're showing that you are making an effort and you're learning and you're showing a lack of fear, right? A lack of fear with moving forward, not being afraid of messing up. Now I'm putting in the texture of the hair, right? So you could see me kind of drawing on top of the whiteout, you know, getting that squiggly line, and it kind of breaks up the white, and it helps to unify like the marker with the whiteout. So I'm basically going back and forth. I'm not really even picking my pen up very much. Notice too, changing the direction of my lines. I can't tell you guys how important that is. Once again, like even when you're drawing something like a sphere, always change the direction of your pen. Oh, I added a little tear. I made the moon smile, but I added a little tear, kind of showing the contrast between hope and, you know, sadness, and knowing that time is going and soon this virus will be over. Ooh, gave it a top lip. Why am I doing this so fearlessly? Because I actually had a lot of pencil work already on the sun. So make sure that you are like doing a lot of line work with your pencil, and that can kind of guide your pen, so you're making those decisions early on. You can always go back with your pencil if you feel like you don't know what direction your lines are going. Go back, work with your pencil, do pencil on top of marker, and then add pen, right? But there is, the worst thing you could do is to not do it at all. And I'm actually doing pen over the white stipples some points, right? Because I'm kind of blending everything together. I'm making things into more of a gray. Notice that I'm rotating my board. I'm defining the edge of this sphere because I want the viewer to see that this sphere is in the front. But I'm constantly rotating the direction of my board, going in kind of different directions, rotating. Okay, now I am taking what I did in the sun and I'm adding that texture to the rose, adding the swirl in the rose to show that the eye is going around. So really line, like thinking back to the beginning of our study together, line creates form, and the direction of lines tells me, the viewer, what direction it's going. And those are actually ellipses, technically, like adding in curvy ellipses around the flower to kind of make things go around, keeping things color balanced. And that's why this kind of works as a final exam, because we're using all sorts of skills. We're using drawing skills and principles. Now, if you just want to do circles throughout your board because you don't feel very confident about your drawing skills, that is fine. We want to finish our work. Okay, so I'm adding in these curvy, like around the board lines, kind of anywhere I go, because I want to bring everything together. I want it to feel very cohesive. So I'm moving my line work around the board, kind of circulating, rotating it, always rotating the skateboard, right? Sometimes it's upside down, sometimes it's to the side, because you can't always rotate yourself because you have less space. So I'm kind of rotating the direction of the board. Now I'm putting in texture in the teeth. I'm actually putting in little dots and stipples, little scribbles throughout. And what's fun about drawing a skull is it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of grimy and it's old. And it's bumpy and it's been through a lot, so you know you can really have fun with the texture. Now I'm adding in hatching behind the letters, not required, but I figure if I have these scribbles throughout the skull, adding some scribbles behind the letters. I'm actually adding curvy lines here to make the skull, the inside of the skull, seem 3D. And that's all on top of the whiteout is on the edge of the eye because that's where the light would hit. Okay, I'm going in, I'm adding in hatching, 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 hatching. This is a little tedious, but I'm going to tell you at the end of the project, when you're in the art zone, it's just kind of fun, right? You don't feel like you're doing any work. And it's kind of like you're meditating. And it's so fun to just look at bright colors, move around the board, to have fun. So really, really have fun with this project. And I'm just kind of like continuing to outline. So yeah, like extra credit if you work with a pen on top of the marker. If you're layering, I'm really going to look closely at these skateboards and look for areas of growth and improvement. And this will inspire us to work hard during the second semester. This will be kind of our kickoff point. So I really, really challenge you guys adding in the hatching at the left of the crown because my light's coming in from the right. So I really, really challenge you guys to see this board as a chance to just show different strategies, go back, use those drawing techniques, hatching, cross hatching, stippling, blending. And yeah, just think about that. Have fun with your drawing techniques. And if you're behind, you're just using the markers. If you're behind, you're still working in those light values today. And then you can do this over the weekend. Wherever you are, it's never too late to get a good grade. Adding in the hatching throughout the board here. Adding in hatching and curves behind the spheres. Always stepping back, trying to unify things. Make sure everything's kind of looking the same. Have fun. Have fun.